So welcome to the Global Discussions with creatives, leaders and thinkers. My name is Simon Hodgkins and I'm delighted to be joined by Simon Haigh. You're very welcome to the podcast, Simon. Let's begin by asking you to introduce yourself to our worldwide audience. Over to you, Simon.
Well, it's great to be here, Simon. It's strange to be talking to another Simon. And so I'm Simon Haigh. I'm kind of known as the growth strategist. Basically, that's a culmination of all the work I do helping. Basically, if you can think of a seesaw, on the one hand, I help organizations identify and achieve their purpose to grow towards it. And then on the other end of the seesaw, individuals to identify and grow towards their potential. So it's purpose and potential. And I do that through, various training, coaching, e-learning, mentoring, type programs, speaking, et cetera, et cetera. And it's great fun to be able to work on purpose and potential. So that's it that's probably the quickest nutshell I've ever given.
So Simon, that's a very interesting world that you're involved in. How did you get into that type of work? What sort of dragged you into that area of expertise?
Oh, okay. Well, it's a long story, which I'll be as quick as I can. It's the culmination of a career, and it's kind of like the funnel end of a career. So I started my career as a lawyer in England, and then here in Ireland and in Australia. And then I realized quite quickly that I was less interested in documents and contracts and more interested in people and business and growth and change and all that sort of stuff. So I ended up working for a couple of big tech companies here in Ireland. And I ended up becoming a CEO of an American company in Australia. And then the last 10 years, since 2013, I set up my own business, the GCM Consulting Group, otherwise known as simonhaigh.com. And really, the work I do today really tracks everything I witnessed when I was working in-house, how people work together, how they don't work together, how they communicate well. Really, it's all about people. It's how people influence, how they connect, how they persuade, how do they use different language. And that, when you think about it, I often talk about business is, you can think of a triangle with 3 R's at the top, at bottom, and the bottom right. Revenue at the top, risk at the bottom left, reputation bottom right, and in the middle, none of that happens without relationships, people. So really the work I do, and I was seeing a lot of obvious gaps in the market around companies not achieving their purpose because they weren't maximizing their people. And at the same time, people within organizations didn't feel they were being maximized. So I really bring it all together.
Yeah, so thanks for the backstory there, because it's interesting how you go from sort of the law side of things into this area. But this area is fascinating to me, Simon, because you're working with leaders, entrepreneurs, businesses, I'm sure, of different shapes and sizes. But businesses have been through quite a traumatic few years, haven't they? We've got digital transformation, we've had the pandemic, we've got the rapid change now of, as we're recording, of AI and how that's impacting businesses. Yeah. So have you seen a big change over the last number of years, or are the fundamentals still the same and important when it comes to things like business strategy and growth?
I think the fundamentals are still the same. I think they've always been revenue, risk, reputation, and relationships. They've always been the fundamentals of business, and they always will be. What I'm seeing is a big shift. I often say that we went to bed in 2019 and we woke up in 2030. We think we're in 2023, but basically everything's accelerated. So, the way we communicate has accelerated. The way we're communicating now, you and I haven't ever physically met, and yet we're doing this. And, whereas 15 years ago, before Zoom and Teams and all the other platforms, we would have been like Matt Damon in The Martian. We would have all been locked in our own houses. So there's been wonderful advances brought by technology in terms of the way we communicate. There are also challenges as well with hybrid working. How do people manage each other? How do people lead? What effect has that on mental health? Are we moving away from traditional leadership to more agile leadership? The working life, I think we're moving less from seeing the office as a place and seeing it more as a tool, and I think that I'm really interested in. So I think it's the outcomes, it's the outputs of the change that the way we communicate, the way we work, all those kind of things I think have changed a lot, but the end results are still the 4 R's.
No, I love that. And I love the way you put it, that we went to sleep and then we kind of woke up and way
Very
ahead of
early.
actually the year that we're in.
Yeah, yeah,
Because that's a great way of describing it, that
yeah,
sort of acceleration that we experienced. Yeah, I love that, Simon.
yeah. No, absolutely. And then it's clear, and it's amazing how resilient human beings have been. You know, I mean, so much churn and growth and change, and yet the world is still going on, business is still going on. Yes, there are, I suppose the biggest challenges are around, you know, when you think about it, businesses are still people. So we still have to find ways of, you know, looking after our people, mental health and all this sort of stuff. But yeah, I think I wanted to say that because, you know, I think some businesses are just thinking in terms of themselves, but they don't exist without the R in the middle of that triangle.
100%. I couldn't agree more. And the other thing I wanted to ask you, though, is that the types of questions or challenges that companies and individuals are facing, do you find there's more of a common pattern, or are they all very, very different? And also the kind of organizations that you're working with, because you've some very impressive names of the companies that you work with, Simon.
Yeah, well, McKinsey's do a piece of research every year, and they look at the key blockages in every company. They've probably been doing this since the 40s, and fundamentally those blockages haven't changed and won't change. And things like, you know, not having the right unified vision in the business, not having the right employees, not having the right cultural cohesion, communication challenges, team management challenges, technology, and maintaining and building trust. I think those seven key areas of blockage have always and will always be there. But I think the flavor of them are changing. So, for example, around trust, you know, how has hybrid working impacted on the way that we communicate? And for example, if you need to delegate to somebody and they're not near you, how do you pay attention? How do you notice? The same with around communication. How do you maintain teamwork? I read a book recently that 95% of all the inventions in the Western world since the 1600s have been invented by two or more people physically in a room. And when we're not physically in a room, how is that impacting? Now, there are still inventions happening. So I think humans are just pivoting in the way we operate. But those blockages are the same blockages. They just have different flavors nowadays.
That's a good point. Yeah.
Yeah. And in terms of, I think you asked about the clients, you know, I'm blessed. You know, I have a whole smorgasbord of different type of clients, ranging from business schools. Today, I'm doing some work with the Royal College of Surgeons, academic institutions, governments. I do work with the Irish Civil Service through Irish Times Training, and then corporates. But at the end of the day, all of these organizations, I come back to that triangle. You know, even a government body, okay, R isn't revenue, but they still need to have income coming in. They still need to manage their reputation and the risk, and they still do that through people. So people are people everywhere. There's an interesting book called The Organizational Zoo, written by an Australian guy called Arthur Shelley, and he likens in every organization, and I've lived in 5 countries and worked in many different sectors, there are 12 animals in every company. There's the laughing hyena, there's the wise owl, there's somebody who metaphorically will stab you in the back, somebody who will metaphorically stab you in the front. They happen, people are people everywhere, you know. So I find that, you know, all organizations have the same challenges around scaling and the blockages and maintaining the 4 R's. That's just my experience.
No, that's a great point. And I want to just dive into something about brand as well, because we've seen with the advent of social media, we've seen with the advent of all these different platforms, that personal brands have become a thing in business, as well as the company as a brand, if you like, and the company investing in their brand. But when it comes to individuals and growing their own personal brand, are you seeing that having much of an effect on people? Do they need much coaching through that? Because it's a double-edged sword sometimes. You build a brand around an individual and they can leave an organization. And then you kind of say, well, where did that get us? But that sort of, and I'm going to use the word authentic in inverted commas, but that sort of genuine conversation from somebody that they can relate to within a business seems to be growing in importance more in these recent times.
Yeah, no, I agree. And there's a lot of great books out there. Dory Clark has the book, her book, Entrepreneurial You, right? I think that's a fantastic book. I base that on a lot of the work that I do, that even though you're working within a company, you could still be working within the company, but you have your own brand, right? Whether you use it within the company or you use it to build something externally. And I think, Jeff Bezos says that a brand for a company is like a reputation for a person. It's all reputation. And I think all of us need to think more about ourselves as a brand. And I do quite a lot of work in this space, corporate brands and personal brands. And some of the key factors are consistency. People need to get a sense of who you are. And it's much easier to get recognized for being, for doing one thing or a few things really well. You can't be everything to everybody. At one point, I wanted to be a master of many different areas, but I kind of focus on growth. The second area then is you need to be focused. The third area then, you need to be seen as being authentic. People, there's a lot of copycats out there. It's very easy to be somebody you're not, but you need to be authentic. And I think the best way to do that is through telling your own story and getting people a sense and a flavor of you. I guess the next thing is you need to create an impact. If you don't create an impact, you really don't have a brand. You might think you have a brand. It's a bit like if you want to start a company. I work with a lot of entrepreneurs and they spend ages agonizing on putting a website together and a business plan. And they turn on the website and they don't sell anything. They're not selling anything because they haven't made an impact, right? And so a business is theoretical unless you've made an impact. And the same with our brands. And I think sometimes you have to take chances. And just finally, how many people out there are thinking, what legacy am I leaving? When I've gone, how will people remember me? Marshall Goldsmith is a great example. And I'm blessed because he's been a mentor, the world's #1 leadership thinker. He's 72. And already he's leaving his legacy. He's handing over his knowledge to people who want it. I think if you move forward, think in the future, how would I like to be remembered, and use that to drive your personal brand? That's really powerful,
That is so powerful. And, on one of these episodes that I've recorded, I don't think it's been released yet, but we actually had a discussion about knowledge philanthropy. And I think it's such a fascinating topic when you look at it in that context.
Yeah. No, I agree. And, in the work that I do, in the coaching and the training I do, I share my presentations. I have a master deck of 600 slides and I slice it for different things. And I share it with the people I work with. Now, I take a risk because they can easily post it somewhere. But at the end of the day, all knowledge can be found somewhere, right? I mean, all of my material is based on something else, right? And so we can all create our own knowledge. And when you think about it, how many more fake Rolexes are in the world than real Rolexes? And yet people with money still want to buy the real Rolex, So I don't think we should be too intimidated by giving our material away, For me, it's a sign. You have to be careful, but as long as you're creating new material, don't worry about sharing stuff. That's my own personal view, Simon,
Yeah, no, I like that a lot. And the last thing I want to ask you on this before we change gear, Simon, is you talk a lot about growth, and you help companies and individuals grow their business, right?
Yeah.
But when it comes to the actual sales, the negotiation, the way deals are done, we saw businesses having to refigure their business out to sell stuff online. Have you seen a turn back? Because you mentioned, getting people in a room and the importance of that. But there seems to be a lot of businesses who've discovered that they can actually do an awful lot of this more effectively now. But when it comes to those deals, those negotiations, scaling up that revenue, what are you advising companies on now? What are you looking at from a growth perspective?
I think, the same principles apply, I mean, whether you're online or face-to-face, you have to plan, right? You always have to plan, right? There's no substitute for that. And as I've just kind of said, you still need to pitch, right? So plan, I call it the 7 Ps of sales, right? So you have to plan, you have to pitch, you have to grab people's attention, you have to provide value, you have to personalize. I don't know about you, but in this online world, when you're getting bombarded with these third-party approaches and they don't know you, right? Why would I, it's a bit like if I go and sit in a restaurant, somebody sidles up to me. I want to have that personal thing. So I think planning, pitching, providing value, personalizing, obviously solving a problem, Pursue but don't annoy, and then persevere. In other words, those 7 Ps apply whether you're online or face-to-face. But the online world has allowed us to, the audience is much bigger. I mean, it's a global audience out there. And so there are specific online deal closing techniques. And I do a lot of work around helping people influence the purchases out there. And, social media is a great platform for grabbing attention. There's all sorts of techniques, now or never, and questioning technique, and, value and match, what's called the match game technique. There's all these different online deal-making techniques that you can use social media to grab attention and get a bigger audience. So the 7 Ps are the same, but the size of the audience out there is multiple times bigger than face-to-face. And I don't think people have realized that. Use the same principles, but get in front of people. And, if you don't ask, the answer is guaranteed no. And if you do ask, it's 50%. So go for it, I think there's too much of a fear of this online world, but the market's out there waiting,
Yeah, and I think you raised an important point there, because you've said the word impact a number of times. And I think cutting through that noise, cutting through and, having an impact. Yeah. And you sort of referenced it earlier when you were saying, some people think they have a personal brand, but if you're not making an impact, if you're not standing out, it's just like that third party, or that person, as you say, sidling up to you in a restaurant that you don't know,
Yeah, that's not the only thing. Like you do have to have credibility. You do have to be good at what you're doing. And also you can't be shouting out your own credibility. You need other people to shout it out for you. That's another thing that's a key part of marketing. Once you have those, Dory Clark talks about this in her book, Entrepreneurial You. It's much easier then to get multiple revenues from various sources, whether it's training, coaching, consulting, speaking. But before you can do that, you need to be credible, and you need other people to give you credit, right? And then it's easier to make impact. So I think it's important to say that, because I think I see a lot of startups and entrepreneurs, and they think they can just jump the first 2 steps and go to impact. You need to know what you're talking about, and other people need to say good things before you can really ramp that impact.
I think that's such a valid point, a valid and important point. Yeah. And what was the line? A brand is actually what they say about you when you're not in the room, right?
Yeah,
I mean, that's basically it. And it's building that credibility, building that trust, building that track record. And obviously through GCM Consulting and SimonHaigh.com, you're providing this highly experienced international consulting. There's a track record there. And look, I want to ask you a little bit. I want to change gear a little bit. I want to ask you a couple of things, because I don't want to run out of time while we've got this time together, Simon. But when you're learning, when your own learning style, when you're onboarding information, are you scouring the web? Are you reading books? Are you watching, YouTube videos? Are you just chilling into Netflix because you're too busy and you just need to turn off for a little while? Yeah. How does that work for you in today's world?
So all of those things. So as you can see behind me, I've got tons and tons of books, and those books over there I haven't read yet, right? So I have a whole load of books in front of me I wanted to show you. And so, knowledge is power. So, the more you read, the better. I also I'm increasingly listening to podcasts, and I'm constantly looking at what people are talking about online as well, the sort of things. And you mentioned Netflix. I also need to chill as well. I find that, going to Amazon or Netflix or whatever it is for me, cinema and the online, the box sets, for me, I think it's as important to escape reality and switch off at some points, and for me, going into a cinema in particular, it's like going into a different universe for 2 or 3 hours, and I think it's equally important to give our minds a break from all the information in the books as well, because I think that sharpens your brain as well. So unfortunately, we don't have enough time in life to absorb all this information. There's so much good stuff out there. But yeah, it's a work in progress, Simon.
But look, I totally agree. I couldn't agree with you more. And coming back to books, though, you've mentioned Dory Clark's book a couple of times. Fantastic book. Yeah. But you have some books there. So when we talk about authors, books, titles, what kind of things would you recommend?
Well, the ones I don't have in front of me, but my favorite book is a book called Into the Magic Shop by an American neurosurgeon called James Doty, D-O-T-Y. And it's a true story. I won't go into the details, but it's a fantastic book. you think he's talking about a magic shop, but what he's really talking about are the keys, the sort of things you need to do to give yourself the best chance to make the best possible decisions in life. Into the Magic Shop by James Doty. Obviously, The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. The Importance of Living in the Moment is another one. Marshall Goldsmith's latest book, The Earned Life, is a fantastic book. It's a New York Times bestseller. He's writing to the world as a 72-year-old man, and he's advising us on what decisions should we make in life to give ourselves the best chance of not having regrets. And then finally, one book that I really recommend, it's one that's just come out called You, Me, We, by somebody I know well, Morag Barrett. Why We All Need a Friend at Work and How to Show Up as One. There's so many books, Simon, but those four would be the four I would go to first.
They're great recommendations. And you know what? I've never read Into the Magic Shop, so that's going on my list.
I really recommend it. I mean,
Yeah.
it's quite visceral, because, and it's a true story. And he's still practicing. On the one hand, you know, he's cutting into somebody's brain, right? And he's doing neuroscience. And then he has these flashbacks to, he had a bit of a broken childhood, and how he got to meet the woman in the magic shop and how she taught him these things. It's a fantastic book.
Well, thank you for sharing those. They're great. Really do appreciate those. There's some great advice there, some great books. And it seems like your bookshelf will continue to expand, Simon.
Yeah, faster than I can read it anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. The other thing I wanted to ask you was a bit about advice. You spend a lot of your time advising other people, helping other people scale. But when it comes to advice that you've received yourself, is there something that's stuck with you in life, something that's helped you? You know, could be back in your childhood, could be something happened to you in recent days. But when I ask you that question, what springs to mind?
Two things. The first things that come to mind, and they might sound a bit trivial, but they've been really impactful for me. The first one is when I was going through my own difficulties about 15, 17 years ago, and I was worried about what other people were thinking, and I had imposter syndrome and ego doubt and all that. Somebody said, what other people think of you is none of your business. What you think of you is your business. So focus on, you know, of course, we've got to impress people. We have to sell ourselves and influence people, but we cannot guarantee responses. And I guess the second of three would be, it comes from Buddhism. Always have plans and strategies in life, but don't attach yourself to the outcomes. Because as we've seen the last 3 years, we have no idea what's going to happen in life. So when something changes or hits us in the face or knocks us over, we then just have to recalibrate. And the third one, probably the most poignant and the one that's really underpinned the growth in my business and journey over the last 2 or 3 years, was from Marshall Goldsmith. At the beginning of the pandemic, I was saying to him, you know, Marshall, I've done all these amazing things, but I don't seem to be optimizing my potential. And he said, Simon, all you need to do is match your confidence with your capability. And it really got me thinking. So they're the three.
That's great advice. And I mean, you mentioned Marshall Goldsmith, and I know you're very connected there. And he is, in his own right, a pioneering leadership coach.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
When I ask you a question about people that you admire, people that have influenced you along the way, people that you look up to, or just maybe it might just be a personality trait. Yeah. Who springs to mind? I'm assuming Marshall is obviously one of those people, but anybody else springs to mind?
Marshall, definitely. Barack Obama. I do a huge amount of work in how do people influence other people, and how do they, because communication for me isn't really language. For me, communication is how we make somebody else feel. It's how we connect. That's what communication is. And Barack Obama, for me, is a really good example of somebody who is assertive in his communication. And assertive communication, for me, is the key to success. It's not aggressive and it's not passive. And assertive communication there's two parts, is A, getting across what you want, need, or feel, and B, in a way that's respectful of others. And when you listen to him, he's always clear and direct. But have you ever heard him get angry or sarcastic? Or you don't hear that. And for me, that is a real skill set, not to, always be direct, but always be nice. I think he would be my go-to in terms of communication.
Two great choices there. Yeah. The other thing I want to ask you about is, what are you passionate about over the next 6 to 12 months? What are you hoping to achieve? How does planning work for you? What's on the roadmap?
So it really is to continue to build the business, simonhaigh.com. Simon Haigh, there's three aspects to the business. So GCM Consulting is really the consulting part of the business. There is the Haigh Institute, and these are all on the same website, simonhaigh.com. The Haigh Institute is the e-learning section, and then simonhaigh.com is the more face-to-face coaching, mentoring, public speaking. So really it's to build those three channels, equally, the e-learning Haigh Institute, the GCM consulting, and the simonhaigh.com, and to have fun with it. And I guess really to, a bit like Marshall, when he worked with me, he said one of my conditions of helping is you need to pass what you need to, when somebody asks you for help, pass it on to them. So I'm really passionate about passing it on. And also when I pass it on, telling the person, my condition with you is to pass it on as well. So it's to build the business and to pass on that message of help.
And just a quick question on the Institute, because obviously you spent a lot of time face-to-face pre-pandemic. You spent an awful lot of time helping businesses in a one-on-one type relationship too.
Yeah.
So what was the thinking behind the Institute? How's that going? Because that's, it sounds like there's a nice library and a wealth of information being built up there. How's that working?
Yeah, so, well, it's a sub-page on the website, simonhaigh.com. And the reason for setting it up was pure and simply, up to the beginning of the pandemic, 99% of my work was face-to-face. And obviously, like lots of people, I had to quickly pivot and move a lot of my material online. And so it forced me to get to know the online world and convert some of my face-to-face programs into online programs directly within my business. And I've also collaborated with other companies, and some of my programs are on their platforms, one over in the States called STEERus and one here in Ireland called Trained In. And it's going well. I mean, it's not the primary driver of revenue. The primary driver of revenue is still the face-to-face stuff. And I don't really intend it yet to be the primary driver, but you have to have, because I enjoy the face-to-face stuff, but you have to have it there, and it will build and continue to build. And I'm in the process of building more material in there. So it was really a business imperative, but it's great to have it there, No,
absolutely. And one of the last things I wanted to ask you is about anything else that you'd like to share with us? Because I know, whether it's ABC Australia or the BBC or some of the national media players, you've been featured in lots of different places. And is there anything else that you'd like to share with our international audience before we wrap up? And if people want to find out more about you, want to get in touch, where's the best place to send them to?
So I'll start with that before I forget it. So the best place is, have a look at my website, and you can connect through that or through LinkedIn. I'm very active on LinkedIn, or email me, simon@simonhaigh.com. I think they're these, but I'm on all the social media platforms as well. But I think they're the three main ones. I think the main thing then is, to try and enjoy life as much as you can. I'm strongly of the view that this isn't a dress rehearsal, right? And so try and enjoy even the difficult times, try and get something out of them. And, and also don't get too hung up on mistakes or getting things wrong. A good friend of mine, Dermot Mannion, who used to be the CEO of Aer Lingus, has this lovely saying: every failed deal in life is a down payment on the next deal, as long as you learn. I've made loads of mistakes. I've lost money in a business venture, but I've noticed that I've got good resilience to bounce back. So don't beat yourself up if you make a mistake, or if you get something wrong, or even if your business fails, right? It's part of life. I think that would be, I've learned that through the difficult times, right? But I think if you can prepare yourself, because life is not a fixed mindset journey. It's a growth journey of ups and downs. It's inevitable, that we're all going to have negative times. And so be prepared for that and see it as a journey.
I love that. I love the down payment on the next thing. I mean, that's brilliant. I love that. Yeah. So thanks so much indeed, Simon. That brings us nicely to the end of this episode today on the Global Discussion. It's been a pleasure to catch up with Simon Haigh. Thank you for watching or listening to us around the world. Be sure that you like, follow, subscribe, do all the things I need you to do to help support the podcast. Visit simonhaigh.com, find out about all the interesting work that Simon's doing there and how he can help you. And I hope you join me back here for more discussions with creatives, leaders, and thinkers. Simon, it's been a real pleasure. Thanks for taking time to join me today.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure. Thanks.